Hey students, welcome back from spring break. We're going to continue reviewing how to divide decimals for this unit. So before we get started, number one, number two is a review from before spring break. If you can work out number one and number two by yourself or with a partner, and then we're going to show the answers on the screen after you had some work time. Pause here so you have some individual work time on these two problems. Here's the answer for number one. Check your work. Just want to highlight things that I saw as misconceptions from before spring break. Make sure your decimal point and your quotient lines up to your dividend in the long division symbol. I put that in green so you know to make sure you emphasize that. And also I highlighted the 0 that I added as a place value because I need to keep going to divide, so I have to add zeros for further place values to keep going. This is number one. Here is number two. Check your work. Same thing. The two key things to watch out for are in green, making sure your decimal place values line up in your quotient, and continuing to add 0 for place values to continue dividing if you need to, if your remainder is not 0. Let's continue building this idea of dividing and why we do certain things when we divide. So we're going to look here and analyze some dividends and divisors. So we're going to analyze the dividends, which is the number inside the long division symbol, our divisors, the number outside the long division symbol, and the quotients in the following calculations. And then we're going to answer some questions. So let's first look at the dividends. I'm going to put that in yellow. Here are the dividends. And think about what pattern you notice. As you see to the right, they're getting bigger. But what am I doing to each number as I go to the right? And I notice that as I'm going to the right, I'm constantly multiplying by 10. We're adding zeros to the end of the numbers, and therefore they're getting bigger by a factor of 10 each time. Let's look at our divisors. I'm going to highlight that in a different color. Let's do blue. And let's see what we notice here. Similarly, they're getting bigger, and they're changing by a similar factor of 10. So things to capture here are that my dividends are increasing by a factor of 10, and my divisors are also increasing by a factor of 10. And when I see my quotients, even though I'm changing both numbers by a similar factor, my quotients seem to keep staying the same at 24. So for some reason that we're proving right now, if I change my divisor and dividend by the same factor, that does not change my answer, my quotient. So let's capture that below here. Complete each sentence in the calculations shown. Each dividend is 10 times the dividend to the left of it. Each divisor is 10 times the divisor to the left of it. And each quotient is equivalent to the quotient to the left of it. So therefore, I'm going to name this fact here. This is what we're going to highlight for today's lesson. Write it down in your notes. If I multiply the divisor and dividend by the same factor, the quotient does not change. So how this helps is the following. If we see hard numbers that we're dividing, we can change them to make it easier for ourselves if we can multiply both numbers by the same factor to make easier numbers that are easier to divide. So let's explore this a little further then. Suppose we are writing a calculation to the right of 72,000 divided by 3,000. Which expression has a quotient of 24? So if I had 72,000 divided by 3,000, and I want to go to the right, which means we're going to multiply by another factor of 10. So I'm going to multiply both these by 10. And essentially multiplying by 10 means you put another 0 at the end to make another place value. So I'm going to do 72,000 with another 0, and then 3,000 with another 0, and now I'm going to have 720,000 divided by 30,000. And if I observe my choices, that's going to be letter C. Now, let's go the other way. Think about how to the right we're multiplying by 10, but the other way we're going to be dividing by 10 to get smaller numbers. So suppose we are writing a calculation to the left of 72 divided by 3. So with 72 divided by 3, we now want to go left. What expression could we use for this? So I'm going to now divide by 10 for both of these. And when I divide by 10, what I'm doing is taking the decimal point and moving it left one for both numbers, because I'm dividing by 10. And when I do that, my new math problem is going to be 7 2/10 divided by 3/10. It's a more challenging problem to do. However, this is still going to provide an equivalent quotient of 24. So to capture what we did review today in today's lesson is that I can multiply the divisor and dividend by the same factor and my quotient will not change. And I can do this to help me find easier ways to divide my numbers. So from there, we're going to now just do some practice. You have now one more page to practice, and you're going to do this on your own or in pairs to work together. There is a problem for 1 where you're going to first explain why they are all the same value, and then 2 is some more long division practice. Right now, focus on number 1. Pause the video so you have some work time by yourself or with a partner, and then continue the video when you have found your answer for number 1. Here is the answer for number 1 for your independent practice. Each division problem has the same value because they're multiplying the divisor and dividend by the same factor of 10. Therefore, they're going to have equivalent quotients. And then for 1b, it says, what's that value? You're just going to divide. I chose this problem here because it's the easiest to do of the 4. And when I divide 450 by 9, I get 50 as my quotient. Be careful with your decimal place value in the zeros. You have to keep dividing till the decimal point. So I put that in yellow in case you made a mistake there. You're now going to do number 2 down here. To practice these 3 problems, pause here so you have some work time, and then continue the video when you've had time to work and get your quotients. Here are the solutions to number 2 in independent practice. I highlighted areas what may have caused you to make mistakes, which are lining up your decimal place values as usual, and then putting zeros to continue dividing if you have a remainder. And then for letter C, those 0 placeholders, if you can't divide into those place values, those are super important to make sure you have an accurate quotient. Review your answers here and then finish off class by completing your X ticket for today's lesson.